Hello, Riley. Thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome.
It's you and I have stayed in touch over the last number of years since we actually worked together. But nevertheless, it's always good to reconnect with you and have a chance to catch up a bit. And here we are. We're going to take a bit of a trip down memory lane.
Yeah.
So maybe as a starting point, if you would please, is just maybe share a little bit about yourself to offer some context, perhaps.
Okay. My name is Riley Haas. I have a master's degree in political philosophy, but I actually have a business that helps what I call solo professionals, people who provide professional services to the general public, with their online marketing. And it's a complete fluke that I went from trying to become a professor in philosophy to doing this. It's sort of, I don't know really how that happened, but it did. And the reason I have this business today is because of you. It's not something that I ever would have thought of, honestly, in the past, or dared to do, or thought I was capable of, or all those things. And yeah, I've been doing it, I guess, on the side for about 5 years, and then I went full time completely into it about in January of 2020, so right before the pandemic that I'm sure now everyone watching this will know what I'm talking about. And I've been doing it full time for just over a year, but before that I was doing it, like I said, on the side for a while. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't know what else can I say about it.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Much appreciated. Much has happened in the name of what you just shared, and our work, we were just chatting about it before we came live here, is our work together dates back maybe 7 years or so.
Yeah,
and right. Perhaps as a starting point, could you share a bit about, what was going on before you even knew of a guy like me, or engaged a guy like me, to give a sense for, perhaps what led up to you meeting a guy like me and engaging a guy like me?
So I had a job that I was fairly unhappy with, or I was in varying degrees of happiness depending on the month. I was not paid my rightful salary, but that wasn't usually a problem for me. The problem were there were other problems with my work, which was, there were many things that were very comfy about it, but I had issues with how much responsibility I was given, because that varied on seemingly by the day. It was a very small company, and there were all sorts of little things about it that ate at me, that at first made me, there were things that I didn't care about that much, and then it built up over the years. I got a little more resentful, I think, of the situation, and some of that was because I knew I wasn't getting paid what I could be getting paid if I just gone somewhere else. But it didn't become a problem until I became unhappy. And I think when we were first introduced, I was just starting to think about looking for other jobs. And I certainly had a very weird impression. I think it might be a popular one prior to the last few years, but I didn't know what coaches did, basically. And I had a sort of like, this sounds a little cruel, but like, coaches are for people who are sort of lost, and I certainly, even though I was actually unhappy at the time, I didn't feel lost particularly. I feel like all I knew is that I needed to switch jobs. And I'm not even sure I really fully knew that, but I was starting to get there, but it wasn't really a big, like, part of my awareness. And the other thing is that it's important, that I should have mentioned in the intro, is that I am I've published 3 books, and I had relatively recently published my 3rd, and I was feeling really sort of stuck on how much time I could spend on that, both with what was going on in my professional life, where I had a job that was fairly accommodating of that, but not enough, in some ways, and then I also in my personal life as well. And so that was also eating at me, the fact that I had published these 3 books and I'd sort of gotten stuck and hadn't gone anywhere with that, because my goal at the time, and I think it's still a goal, was to live off of my writing eventually. And that's something that I really wanted to do, but I didn't know how to do it. And I was frustrated by that, but also, again, sort of like tamping it down. Mm-hmm. And so I felt, I certainly didn't think I needed help from anybody. I know, I still remember when my mom first mentioned you to me, I was like, what are you talking about? Go away, basically. It was a little politer than that, but, I was like, I don't need a coach. What's a coach for? And I was very skeptical the first time we talked on the phone. I was very skeptical the first time we met in person at a Starbucks that no longer exists. I live back sort of close to that old neighborhood again. So I've walked by it and seen it's gone. And yeah, I was really, I guess I was vaguely aware that I had a bunch of problems in my life that I wasn't dealing with, personal as well, in addition to professional. And I didn't think that I needed help. I've not been a person who has asked for help prior to meeting you, I would say. It's not a thing that I like to do. It's not a thing that I felt like I should or could do. It's something that I felt was like for, I don't know, other people, not for me, that I was somehow made of sterner stuff or something like that. And and there was a lot of denial going on, I think. And there was a lot of repression. And I think there were things that I needed to realize that I was a long way from realizing at that time. And my parents saw it. Both of my parents, in different ways, said things to me within months of each other, letting me know that they felt like there was something wrong. And I certainly didn't see it at first.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I smile in appreciation for, your comment on denial and repression. Not just because I remember that time, but because I remember my own times of my own denials and my own repressions, and how nudges can come our way, whether it come from another person or come up from within ourselves. We still have to decide, whether or not we're going to pay attention to the incoming data or we're going to turn away.
Yeah.
But I know I count my blessings that you turn this way to, an opportunity for me to get closer to who you are as a person and to what the array of talents that you have. So from there, so we met. There's this point at which, when you meet someone new, and as you say, I was a healthy dose of skepticism to begin with.
Yeah. Very healthy.
Clearly something changed. Maybe you could touch on that, because, it's safe to say that the viewer already knows that we work together.
Yeah.
Kind of knows the end of the story before the middle of it. But if you could maybe touch on, what brought you to a point where you were willing to, A, embrace outside support, and B, what gave you the confidence to move forward in this work that we've done together.
Yeah, so I don't know if there was an exact moment. It was more of a slowly progressing. It progressed over a few weeks or months. I can't remember now. Where I was very like, "What are you talking about, Mom? I don't need to talk to anyone." To then speaking to you, and being one of the things that I remember being super impressed by was just like how well you listen, and how how I felt like I was being heard in a way that I definitely didn't feel like I was being heard by other people who I was talking to on a daily basis. And that I think helped to just sort of, you're very good at like eliciting, I think, sort of truths from people that are maybe a little tamped down. And as I would say things, suddenly I'm like, oh yeah, I do sort of feel that way, and maybe realize, that there was something there. And then, as I would later learn, you're also very good at pushing and when necessary, and it's something that I certainly do very well with when people are a little, um, you know, push me forward a little bit where I wouldn't necessarily go on my own. And I don't know when I first sensed that from you, but I've known that for a very long time. Well before we met, I knew that like I need prodding from other people to really, you know, sometimes to do the things that I want to do. It's just for whatever reason I have a tendency to be either lazy or or to be comfortable, really, at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And I need to be pushed out of that sometimes by other people, and I will do it sometimes on my own, but more often than not, any other people. And I think I sense that in you at some point. I'm sorry I can't pinpoint an exact moment. I don't like, I remember making the decision. I don't remember that there was a trigger. I'm very reflective. I've always been very self-reflective, and I assume I was stewing over it for quite some time, because it was a considerable investment, and it was something that I'd never done anything like in my life. I'd never worked with anybody on me. It's never happened in my life before. And so it was a strange situation to be in, partly because I didn't believe it was something I needed to do like within like weeks earlier. So it was a very strange situation to be in. But I think it was a matter of, meeting you, feeling that there was something about you that really, really worked for me in terms of the way we spoke to each other, that I thought was going to be valuable. But also through that whole process, realizing really like that there was something deeply not okay in my life that I needed to deal with. And that had been very much repressed before. And it was partly the conversations with my mother and with you around doing this that helped me realize that. And then with those two things, I guess, happening at the same time, at some point I did realize, here I'm in this position right now. I know that one of the things I was aware of, one of the things that was really eating me, and I finally became aware of it. And I was like, well, this is going to bother me in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. So why not deal with it today? And I think that was one of the things that was really like, where I was like, okay, let's jump in. It feels like a big risk, but let's do it anyway. And because it's like, why put it off? Why not try to do something different if what currently isn't working?
Yeah. You know what? You take me right back there. I remember you sharing that with me as to, why you decided, you being able to see that this is probably going to fester.
Yeah.
And so at some point, I'm undoubtedly going to have to confront this.
Yeah.
And, I can relate to similar junctures in my own experience where I either happily, comfortably, uncomfortably put it off.
Yeah.
Way more than those, in the earlier part of my experience than otherwise in the later part of my experience, where change has already happened, and transition is beckoning us forward, and now we get a choice in the matter.
Yeah.
And I credit you with your realizing that there was really no sense putting it off. So, and that moves us into sort of the during of our experience together. A twofold question, if you don't mind, is the A part is around process structure. What was it like in the doing of what we did together while we were doing it? And then the B part is what's it like to, what can I anticipate it might be like working with this guy? Because I'm sensing that I could be spending a bit of time with him, and I'd really appreciate some advanced cues as to what I might be in for. So yeah, that would be, I think that's, my sense is that those are a couple of questions that people might have on their minds.
So I don't know if you did everybody virtually at the time, but we worked together virtually well before it became what everybody does. Yeah. Partly because at some point during it, you moved. We were no longer in the same city, and we met usually once a week. I do remember you being available for other sort of emergency situations as well, and we would talk. And one of the things that I think was really extremely useful for me is as I said earlier, you're pretty good at like pushing buttons a little bit and sort of finding things that are asking the right question or making the right statement that like lets the other person sort of see themselves almost through your eyes or through another person's eyes in a way that feels a little more honest, objective. And it's, I assume for some people that could be scary and intimidating. And the thing about you is that you are not any of those things. You're very thoughtful. You're very kind. I certainly like you're the kind of person it's very, very easy to talk to. But for me, I'm not, that kind of thing doesn't necessarily intimidate me. I like it. I just don't always know that I like it. And I find it was really, really helpful for me because I would realize things mid-call about where I was at, things I was doing to avoid dealing with something, or things I had sort of been festering that I didn't realize were issues, or any number of things. It felt like every time we met, there was like a new revelation there. I was like, oh, okay. There was something that I had not really considered about me or the way I've been behaving or the fact that I've been stuck in the same place professionally for as many years as I had been at that point, or any, and it was a little bit, it felt like a combination. I had never been to therapy when we did this. I have since been very briefly for unrelated, I like to think I had related stuff. I had trouble sleeping once, and I went to see a therapist for like two meetings to deal with the trouble sleeping. But so I'd never been to therapy when we met, but I always sort of vision you as like part therapist, part almost like manager, like career manager, part the experience. It was broad, it was diverse. You have the skills of different, I feel like different professions, and you bring them all to bear in these conversations. And through that, I learned a lot about myself, but also where I was and how to go about trying to deal with it. The first things we did were, initially we looked at trying to get me a new job, and went through, a comprehensive overhaul of my resume, which was in bad shape. And also, if memory serves, I believe you gave me a little bit of a lesson on my horrible cover letters and how I should not be sending out the cover letters I used to send out, which were not thoughtful, to put it mildly. I was not thinking about the person who was reading them. I was thinking about me. And then that changed over time, as we both realized that there was another possibility, especially because that particular getting a new job was not going to really solve the deeper issue. But yeah, I would say, it was something that I looked forward to every week, and it felt like a safe space where I could be completely honest, both with you and with myself. It felt like we would always make progress. I always felt like it was worthwhile. There was never a time where I was like, well, that was a waste of my time. Like, it was never like that. And it was something that I found really, really rewarding and stimulating, and just, it was, even though it wasn't always really structured, it was just always valuable. Sorry. Take a drink of water. Anyway, yeah, I think it was a really profound experience for me, and the details of it are it's been long enough that I don't always remember exactly what, like, the form of it and everything was, but yeah, it was transformative, to use a word that I wouldn't use very often.
Yeah, well, thank you. We created it together. That's the thing about this, is that it's in a spirit of partnership that we come together, and sometimes we know what our agenda is at a particular juncture, and another time we don't. And we rely on each other for each other's authenticity. And you always brought that. You always were all in as far as openness to explore whatever was before us to explore. And it was interesting to touch base with you just before the call, and you had gone back and taken a peek at evidence of our earlier work, and that kind of segues into the final part of our conversation, is looking back in retrospect. Some rather significant time has passed by, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about where you're at, and what's different. What do you see?
Okay. Well, I left that job, and I have my own business, which I did not have before, and it's doing all right. It has freed me up to do the main things that I want to do. The biggest of which is to write a lot. I haven't published the fourth book that I was sort of set on, but instead it's sort of online. The parts of it are online, and there's a long story about being very annoyed with the publishing industry that I won't get into, but I have been doing it anyway, despite that, and that has been really rewarding. I also have found being my own boss to be really challenging, but also in many ways very good for me, in terms of it's not something that I'm necessarily always the best at, but it is something that when it's going really well, it's really, really wonderful, and it's better than any job I had. when I do have success with a client, it's certainly better than any time that I ever did a good job at work, normal work. It's much more rewarding than that, just to really help people and to see them have their own, help them get to a point where they're having success doing what they really want to do. That has a lot more resonance and sticks with you a lot longer than the kinds of things I was doing in my previous careers, which were often very, very mundane work that was not always to a greater purpose, and when it was to some kind of greater purpose, that purpose often changed with very little warning. So it always felt sort of like, it always felt sort of like pointless. It was like I'd work on something for a really long time, and then we decided it wasn't needed anymore, and that I don't have that experience anymore, which is great. It's this is the other part is sort of, I don't know, tougher to talk about, but I don't always know whether it falls in the specter, under the heading of this kind of thing. But I was in a relationship at the time when we first started talking, and it was not going well. And I actually don't remember when the exact days when it really started not going well, and when we started. I know they were relatively close together, and so it was really, and I guess I should have mentioned this in answer to your previous question, but it was really helpful to have you there while that was happening. But that ended up falling apart and not working out. And then I've since met someone else, and now we own our own home together, and things are much better, much better on that side of my life than they were in my previous relationship. And it's night and day. And it's they're all sort of all tied together, right? You can't really actually separate these things, even though we may want to. And that has made it much easier to be, to do everything that I am currently doing. And I was very much the person in my previous relationship who did the supporting. I was always I had to take on most of the stuff, whether it was physical or mental. I was responsible for a lot of our what we had to do as a couple, and now it's a lot more equal now. And so that has made, and I think that it's, as much as that is not why we got together and what we were trying to work on, it inevitably filtered its way in there. And I think that it's hard for me to separate the professional changes from the personal changes that much, especially because they all happened right at the same time.
Yeah.
But they've been good. So it's been, I am able to do a lot of, in any given day, I'm able to do a lot of what I want to be doing, with my life, much more than I was, when we first met. And that's, it's really important to me, and I'm very happy that I was able to do that, because as I said earlier, and as we talked about when we first met, like I sort of was waiting, I think, I don't know what I was waiting for, but I was sort of waiting for things to happen somehow externally that would get me there. And I wasn't necessarily willing to do it myself. And then I learned that yeah, maybe I actually got to do some of that myself. And then I did, and I'm much more of a position now where like I feel like I have control over my life to a great degree, and it's I'm in a pretty good spot. I really, I mean, this last year has been horrible for so many people, and I've been very, very fortunate that it has not been for me. And that it's good to be at a good place.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being so authentically you, as if you could be any different. You've been forthcoming to share more aspects of your story, and I believe that's going to be very helpful for those watching and listening as they take stock of where they are at in their own relationship with change and transition. And the thing about you, Riley, is that you were willing to open in the first place, despite resistances in the beginning. And you continue to invest of yourself and explore. And what you're really characterizing is, as you got, if I may, as you got clear about who you were, clear about what you were capable of, you grew in your ability to release that. And so personally and professionally, which, as we know, for those of us who've gone through significant change and transition, and there's hardly a person who hits their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, and so on, who hasn't encountered these thresholds, is that there is a courage and there's a clarity and a creativity that's needed to begin to let go what no longer serves us, hang out in between what was and what might be, have to navigate sort of intrinsically and extrinsically all the uncertainties that come with that, and find faith that we have within us to figure out what we're going to need to figure out, do what we need to do. And it's a process and an unfolding over time. And I love your story. Your story has so many different dimensions to it, and we've touched on a number of them today. But as you say, wisely so, that as much as we might like to separate out these different dimensions of our experience, it proves impossible to do, because we're just so all, the areas of our lives are also interdependent, of course. And so in any event, I'm really grateful, for the trip down memory lane in and of itself. And I do believe there's so much here, so much richness here for someone who may want to take a peek through an entrepreneurial lens, through a relationship lens, through a inner resistance to, embracing what's, uncertain lens. And so thank you for your time today. Very much appreciated.
You're very welcome. I'm glad to do it.
I look forward to us continuing to connect over time.